and welcome to Long Live Hooky Street, the podcast where we rewatch and discuss every episode of Britain's most beloved TV comedy, Only Fools and Horses. I'm Heather, and I'm joined from Denver, Colorado by my co-host and sister, Jenny. Say hello, dude.
Hello.
So today we're discussing Series 2, Episode 7, A Touch of Class. No, A Touch of Glass. That's funny. But you can clearly see what the title was based on. So grab yourself a bottle of rather special port and let's get started.
This episode aired on the BBC at 8:30 p.m. on Thursday, December 2nd, 1982. Still airing after Sorry with Ronnie Corbett and still ending right before the 9 o'clock news. The number one movie at the UK box office was still The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and the UK number one song was still I Don't Want to Dance by Eddie Grant. So we have a new record this week for the highest viewing figures so far. 10.2 million tuned in to this week's episode. Wow. Now, is that a coincidence, or do we think it was hyped up and advertised more because they knew that they had a great stunt in this one? Don't know.
Maybe people in the comments can tell us what they think about that.
Yeah, because as far as I know, the advertising would have been like little preview snippets, but there's no way that they previewed the the punchline gag of this episode. There's no way.
I mean, even if they previewed the brace yourself, Rodney, brace yourself,
maybe.
It might have been enough.
Yeah, who knows? Is it a coincidence or was it just gaining traction? Interesting. Because this is one of the episodes that a lot of people remember and know of. But like, how did people know to tune in? This is just a wondering I had. So a few little interesting episode facts. So many people will know this already, but the chandelier drop is based on a true story. John Sullivan's father was part of a 7-man team that was sacked for doing exactly this at a mansion in the 1930s. So Sullivan told the story to Ray Butt and David Jason in a bar one night, and they all agreed that they had to use it. So this was the first time that Sullivan wrote a script backwards, where he already knew the ending, but he had to figure out a way to get the Trotters into a mansion. So I mentioned this last week, but location filming for this episode was all done while the cast and crew were already on location down south in Dorset filming for It Never Rains. The chandelier prop cost £6,000 to make, despite being made from cut parts of Woolworth's plastic salad bowls. It was a one-of-a-kind, meaning they only had one chance to get the shot right. More on this later. So Ridgem Hall was fictional, but shots here were filmed at the Claysmore School in the village of Iwerne in Dorset, which was in term during filming, so they had to shoot around the school operations. The shots of Grandad undoing the fastening nut were filmed separately in a house that belonged to Ray Butt's girlfriend, since the school would not allow them to lift the floorboards. So, as usual, I've got a little more trivia to scatter throughout the episode breakdown, so let's move on to the rankings for now.
Okay, sure, let's do that. So if you're new here, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast, and we release a new episode every Saturday. That's 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time if you're in the UK. So figure that out, whatever time that is, if you're somewhere else. Each week, we will reveal and compare our rankings for the episode. So prior to recording the entire podcast, we independently ranked all 64 episodes. So let's start with you, Jenny. What is your ranking for A Touch of Glass?
I'll preface this by saying I know it's lower than people will expect, but I'll explain why. So my ranking is 41.
Interesting. Okay. So why have you ranked that as 41?
So the main reason is I'm not going to take anything away from this episode. I think it's amazing. It's great. It's one of a kind of thing. Everybody loves it. Everybody remembers it. It's a great episode. It just, to me, the most of the episode is not that great. Like, it's fine, but it's not that standout. Nothing else really that memorable about it. Everyone remembers the end scene. The rest of it is just good. It's a good episode, but it's not that great. So it knocked down a little bit below some of the ones that have, for me, a lot more memorable dialogue and scenes in them than this one. Mm-hmm. And that's all. How about you, dude?
Yeah, I felt very similarly to you. So my ranking for this is 46.
Okay, so lower than
you by 5. Yeah, and I completely agree with you, dude. Yeah, when I was watching this episode back, I was like, oh, yeah, it's such an iconic episode. If you said, like, name 5 Only Fools and Horses moments, this is probably going to be in everyone's, like, 5 they'd name.
It's always in them,
but at the same time, You're right. It is an episode that once you know that's coming, and most people do, the rewatchability for me is not as prominent as it would be for other episodes, because yeah, this is, I know the chandelier is going to break. It's a great moment. Of course, I've watched it many times and I always get a laugh out of it, but you're absolutely right. I think the rest of the episode, it has some bits that are good and some exchanges, which we'll get into in the episode breakdown. But overall, it kind of reminds me of the format of the Yellow Peril, which I also spoke about, saying that it's got this like memorable moment, like right near the end with the grave all lit up or something people remember, or the Chinese takeaway being lit up with that yellow. But the rest of the episode is kind of throwaway to me. And I think, yeah, this is a little bit similar in this episode as well. But yes, what about IMDb?
Yeah, well, it won't surprise you probably to know that this is in the top 10 on IMDb.
That does not surprise me, yeah.
This is episode 9. And that's probably why I didn't look at the IMDb rankings before I did mine, but it's one reason why originally I put it higher, because you always are kind of pulled into the idea that, oh, that's a great episode, you've got to highlight that one. And there's a reason why that will end up in the top 10 on IMDb, is because it's a famous episode. More people will watch it, equals more people will rate it, which is why it ended up in the high ranking on IMDb.
Yeah.
And everyone remembers it. And yeah, you've only got to watch any BBC documentary of the top 10 moments in comedy, or any Only Fools and Horses documentary, and they always mention it. And that's because, yes, for its time, and it was historic. It was a great moment. And if you didn't know it was coming, because I'm pretty sure I already knew of this episode before I watched it.
I definitely did.
Yeah. It supersedes itself, like the moment. You can't watch it without a spoiler.
No.
Now. But in the day, back then, on what date did we say this aired? Thursday, the 2nd of December, 1982. Back on that day, those 10.2 million viewers... Yeah, those 10.2 million viewers got that moment in the moment revealed, and you can't beat it.
Well, again, this also has that, that cult story about, which again, I'm sure you'll mention later, to go with the chandelier drop as well, with what the story Nick Lyndhurst told. So I think, you can't beat its notoriety, but it is also the rest of the episode. If you said like, oh, tell me about some of the other scenes in the episode you liked, I bet people would be like, what scenes? I don't know.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Again, going through it to watch it to make notes, I'm like, I didn't watch this one a lot.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I know the end scene, yes, because I've seen it in every documentary 100 times, but the episode, I'm not super familiar with it. So that says a lot, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, okay. George, if you've got nothing else on rankings, do you want to go ahead and start with the episode breakdown?
Sure, let's do that. The opening scene, we have a new location we've never seen before. Grandad, Dell and Rodney have been to an auction somewhere in the countryside, not specified. And my first question is, why did they take Grandad? It's so unusual for them to take Grandad to something like this. I'm not sure if they said, oh, let's go for a nice country ride and you can come along and we'll stop off at an auction on the way. But usually when Dell and Rodney are coming out of anything to do with auctions or anything to do with the business, they don't have Grandad with them, I think, until this point.
Right. So they had to take him because he was on holiday in Spain with them.
Oh, yes. Very true. Well, also as well, I think if they hadn't taken Grandad, he would have only been in the episode during the flat scene. So it makes sense they put him in this scene as well. Grandad is complaining at the beginning of the scene that they've wasted their money on what they've bought. And I must admit, I'm inclined to agree because what they have is I'll let Rodney explain it.
They are China cats that play How Much Is That Doggy in the Window?
And then Dell comes back with a line that he does quite often as a rebuttal for when Rodney says something point blank, like how crap it is.
What do you want for £1.25? Oakler bleeding Homer?
Like that is, again, something we hear a lot. Yeah, I think this exchange happens multiple times during Only Fools and Horses. So if anyone wants to reminisce about any of the moments in the comments that they can remember when this happened, please feel free to do that. So Grandad backs up Rodney by saying,
it means there was a balls up at the factory and they put the wrong chimes in.
Which, yes, I'm again inclined to agree with Grandad here. So they load the boxes of the awful porcelain cats into the back of the van, and they need to fit Grandad in as well. So again, begs the question, why did you bring Grandad? You need the space in the van and you bought him. It just makes no sense. But I do like the line where Dell says,
jam him in, go on, the door will hold him in.
Yeah.
It's so unsafe. Poor Grandad. So then we get this really interesting exchange. I'm curious to see what you think of this, where Dell mentions that it was made in Korea. And he mentions that they eat dogs in Korea, which Rodney didn't seem to know. And that, to me, is quite shocking that Dell would know something like that and Rodney wouldn't, because Rodney seems a bit more worldly than Dell, especially when it comes to general knowledge. And then Dell starts making all these really horrible jokes about, the meals that people can get with dogs in Korea. And Grandad and Rodney are saying that they're really grossed out. And at one point, Rodney says,
Oi, one more out of you and I'm going to be sick on your sheepskin, and I mean it.
And all I wrote was cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, all I was going to say when you mentioned this is that they did some really beautiful shots of the Dorset countryside.
Yes, they did, with this horrible dialogue.
They're obviously taking advantage of the fact that they're on location, because they did some beautiful long shots of the countryside. I mean,
with the van going along the road. Yeah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, if this episode shows us anything, it's like some nice British scenery. I mean, you can't get more British. A bigger hall and some nice fields and stuff. So yeah.
And the trotter van. I mean, that's very British now as well.
And then the great shots of the van just like contrasted with that beautiful scenery. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and it probably saved them a lot of money, because it might not have even been them driving the van. They could dub that whole conversation over it. So
yeah, probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they come across a woman who is broken down, and not the woman broken down, her car's broken down. Imagine like a woman sort of lying on the edge of the road. I broke down. And Rodney convinces them to stop. So Dell actually wants to keep driving here, and Rodney's like, no, we should stop. And Dell's like, oh, what? And they find out straight away, I think, that she is a stuck-up person, because she says in response when they ask her if she's in service at Ridgem Hall, she says,
certainly not, I live there. I'm Lady Richmere.
So this is the first time I think it's the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, where we see Dell react to supposed royalty, and we see that snob come racing to the surface in Dell, which is... I put here a prelude to a royal flush, because that's when we really see it flushed out.
Yeah. I wrote that for the scene where he's talking to Lord Ridmere later. But yes, there's probably quite a lot of that in this episode. A lot of links.
Yeah, it was really interesting, because I don't think until this episode we ever really saw that Dell had any kind of admiration for royalty or for the British upper class. I mean, he might have made the odd joke, but I didn't really get that impression from him until this episode when he says,
Lady Ridgemere? Rodney, get a tow rope.
The only other reference to it is in The Russians Are Coming, when he's talking about the nobility and stuff, but he doesn't necessarily say he aspires to be nobility.
No, it almost sounds like it almost sounds like he's making fun of them in The Russians Are Coming. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. I put that she was putting on an act so they would help her, because she turns very much so in the next scene, and they tow her back to the estate. To her estate, to Ridgemere Hall. And then she's even more stuck up when the butler, Wallace, comes out, and he asks,
And who are these people?
Oh, they towed me home, that's all.
Like, no big deal, right? So fucking ungrateful. Sorry, dude, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that's in my notes. This is a next scene. So should I do my notes on the first, like on the side of the road?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, sure. The next scene. Yeah, no problem. I just wrote the same thing. I put, why was Lady Ridgemere so happy to see them when she's so judgy of them in the next scene? Clearly, like you say, she knows how to act helpless when she wants something. Lady Ridgemere was played by Elizabeth Benson, and she was in 2 episodes of Fawlty Towers, playing 2 different parts. Do you know what they are?
Oh, God. You really put me on the spot there. Oh, my God.
I didn't actually recognise her.
No, I don't recognise her from any from
maybe
Fawlty Towers.
So it says here that she's Mrs. Heath in Gourmet Night. So is she the mom of the annoying kid in Gourmet Night?
Yes, she is.
So, yeah.
He likes what is it?
Salad cream.
He likes salad cream. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, she is.
And then in The Kipper and the Corpse, it says she's Mrs. White. So she's the wife. Right?
The one where they're crying, and the one who goes in the room and can't get in the room. Oh, she is. Yeah, her voice. Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. White want to come into their room.
Yes. Oh my God, she is. She's got brown hair in that episode, hasn't she? Yeah, that's right.
So she's the same actress in those 2 episodes. So yeah, I thought you would find that interesting.
Oh, that is. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, I did not realise that. That's so interesting. Yeah. God, I've watched the Fawlty Towers so many times, and Only Fools and Horses, and I never noticed that. That's so interesting.
So Dell mentions the wedding. So he's referring to Charles and Diana, who married on the 29th of July, 1981. And Here's a little bit of trivia I put in because I wrote here, would the van really have been able to tow the car? The van is loaded up, it's got Grandad in it, and it's towing the car. So
of course it can, because of the magic, Grandad's magic scarf that tows the van.
That I'm not really sure about why that happened, but I put in here a little bit of trivia about the van just to start us off because we haven't really talked about the van yet. So I thought this would be a nice time to add it in since we've got some nice shots of the van. So the idea of the three-wheeled van was a very deliberate choice by John Sullivan because of Rodney's quote from Big Brother where he says, everywhere they look, there's something missing. And he mentions the three-wheel van.
Yes.
So it mentions in the Lovely Jubbly book that back in those days that it was filmed, you only needed a motorcycle license to drive a van. So you didn't actually need a license to drive this, which was a follow-on from Dell's history as a mod where he used to drive a scooter. So Sullivan chose the Reliant Regal because it was so gaudy. This particular model of car was manufactured from 1969 to 73, so it would have been about 10 years old if the Trotters had owned it at this point. And the show producers rented several different versions of the vans over the years from a company called Action Cars.
God, I can't believe they didn't buy one. I'm surprised to have as like...
Yeah.
Well,
Like, so it says
to paint it and stuff.
No, it says here it was cheaper to rent it for one series and scrap it and have it remade for the next series. I'm surprised about that too.
Yeah.
So it mentions here in Lovely Jubbly again that the first van was used for series 1 and 2, which had the APL 911H registration. And if you do look closely, it has a distinctive white panel on the bonnet, which is hard to notice unless you're looking for it. But by the time filming took place for Diamonds Are for Heather, it was actually a different van. So this will be the last time that this van was featured.
I wonder if that's because they put the Dell and Heather across the windscreen in that episode.
Yeah, it's also there's a significant a couple of weeks anyway between airing of those two episodes, but the location shots for these were shot way before the location shots for Diamonds Are for Heather, so they might have scrapped the van because they didn't know they were doing a Christmas special. Who knows? But it actually has a different registration as well, the one in Diamonds Are for Heather.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice that.
So that's all I had. So yeah, we can move on to the scene outside if you like, but I only had one note on that scene, and you mentioned Wallace. He was played by Donald Bissett, who was an English actor and writer, perhaps best known for being in 4 episodes of Doctor Who. But he was also uncredited as a patient in Carry On Again, Doctor.
No, really? Oh, yeah. I love the carry-ons. We talked about those last week when we were doing It Never Rains. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have any other notes on outside of the hall, so if you want to just do that scene.
Okay, sure. So as I already mentioned, she was mean to them, didn't give them any acknowledgement for towing the car. And then I really love Dell kind of gets his own back of them sort of treating them like that when Wallace goes to push the car and Dell says,
Oi, you shouldn't be pushing a car like that at your age. Keep your knees bent and your back straight.
Rodney calls Wallace a ponce here. So we have ponce again.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure sort of what that's referencing here. And then Rodney wants to leave, and Grandad, I think, wants to leave as well. But of course, Dell, he wants to stay because he sees an opportunity to make money, which I understand. And Rodney reckons that the Royals are skint nowadays, and Dell points out their expensive cars, and then Rodney concedes and says, okay, no, they do have money, but they don't want to know the likes of us, basically. And then there's a really funny comment here where Dell says,
They may think that you two are peasants. Well, come to that, I think you two are peasants. But me, I'm one of them that is accepted anywhere.
Again, kind of makes me think about Miami Twice for some reason, because I think Dell has that attitude with like when he's been mistaken for Don O'Ketty, and then he's like, yeah, like, everyone just takes to me, everyone just likes me. And obviously they don't really, no one ever does, which is interesting because I mean, I guess if you did meet Dell in real life, he would be very annoying, but as a character to watch on a show, he's fantastic. So, and then the Lord of the Manor sees them through the window, and he thinks they've come for a tour. He thinks they're the general public, and he says they're not open. And then Dell explains,
We're not members of the general public. We're friends of your wife.
So he invites them inside, thinking that they're friends of his wife. Now that's quite interesting because the wife wasn't there. You got these 3 guys that do not look anything like they'd be friends with his wife standing on the door, and all it takes is for them to say, "We're friends with your wife," and he goes, "Come right in." So that's a little bit like security's lacking at Ridgem Hall. And then Dell just warns Grandad and Rodney, what not to do when they're in there. And I really like the line when he says,
And don't you go dropping none in there.
which I assume is referring to farting.
Yes.
Yes, just
I would
checking.
say so. Yeah.
So you don't have anything else about that scene, right?
No.
Okay, cool. So now we're in the living room. And we begin with Dell admiring a painting and a conversation with the Lord of the Manor. And I'm pretty sure you're going to say what I'm going to say here. Very similar to all of the, is that a Da Vinci things in A Royal Flush? So yeah, very,
Right.
and even getting the artist's name wrong, he calls Van Gogh Van Gogh.
Yeah.
And Rodney corrects him.
Van Gogh happens to be my favourite artist and all.
It's a canaletto.
Beg your pardon, Rodney?
It's a canaletto.
No. I know it's a canaletto. I was just saying that Van Gogh happens to be one of my favourite artists, that's all.
So again, this is a very common exchange, which again, feel free to mention other times this happens. So it's like Dell always does this when Rodney corrects him. He says he knows. Oh, I already knew that. I'm just saying this as well. And he does that on a few occasions. I can't think of any off the top of my head. So again, if anyone wants to write in the comments another example of when that happens. The Lord mocks the Lord. They call him the Lord. What's his name?
Lord Ridgem.
Just Lord Ridgem. Yeah, we don't have a name. So the Lord mocks Dell, I put, when Dell asks...
Yeah, why do you reckon he chopped his ear roll off him?
Doctor's orders, possibly?
Which, again, I did not get as a reference when I was younger. That kind of gets brushed over, but I think he's clearly referencing if you had to listen to Dell, you'd want to chop your ears off. And then everyone in the scene looks very uncomfortable apart from Dell. I feel like, again, we get this quite a few times, especially in A Royal Flush, where Dell is the only one having fun. And Dell continues to look around the room, picking things up. And the Lord and Lady are trying to get rid of them. Again, imagine having someone like that in your house, just picking up all your stuff and looking at it. It must be really awkward. And Grandad asks,
How old is it?
Is what? Old is what?
The house. Is it old?
Yes. The original structure was built in 1642.
Oh. Still, you've done it out nice.
So yeah, I just love how Grandad is always true to himself. He doesn't put on any airs and graces. Like Rodney and Dell in this situation both try and put on airs and graces at certain times, but Grandad's just himself all the time, which I really love. And then Wallace comes in and says that the Lord has had a phone call from the chandelier people, and as he's leaving, he whispers to his wife to get rid of them, which of course at this point I think you would be feeling if you were in his position. And then Dell has gone over to the porcelain, which is considerably more expensive than maybe the other stuff he was looking at. And I found it really funny this moment when he picks up this really expensive thing and the lady says,
It's mostly Dresden, and that particular piece is worth several £100.
And then Dell starts sort of almost throwing it a little bit in his hands and gives it to Rodney. And Rodney does the same. And they're like, yeah, feel the weight of that. You can tell it's... I mean, obviously, it's the joke that they're, doing that with something that she just said is really valuable and they could easily drop it. But yeah, I mean, who would do that? That is such a crazy thing to do in someone else's house. Slightly uncomfortable this bit now that I'm older and I'm looking at this. When Dell sits next to the lady on the couch, he's very close and he puts his hand on her leg, which is something he does do in quite a number of scenes with women. And again... It's not completely like over the top, but you can tell that she's very uncomfortable with it, and she sort of puts her skirt back down over her knees and stuff. So yeah, I don't really like when we see that side of Dell, sort of getting a bit too close to women or making women feel a bit uncomfortable. And then Dell leaves to get the cat from the van because he thinks that she will want that for some reason. And she says something extremely condescending and stuck up to Rodney and Grandad when she says,
Where do you live? That is assuming you're not squatting here.
And then Rodney tries to make out they live somewhere nicer than they actually do. And every time he says something, Grandad again just knocks him down and comes in with the honesty.
Oh, no, we rent it.
No, we lease it. He forgets, bless him. He's got a bit of shrapnel. No, it's a lease, Grandad. Do you remember? A long-term lease.
Oh, yeah, we lease it. Yeah. The council said we could buy it for $8,000.
And again, Grandad doesn't get the hint here. He keeps on fucking up what Rodney's saying. He keeps on correcting him and saying the truth, which he doesn't do in the next scene. That's why I'm mentioning that he does that here for Rodney. So something else I wrote here, Rodney and Dell appear to be drinking spirits, but don't they need to drive home? Rodney's got a glass of whiskey. Dell just downed whatever glass of, what was it, port or brandy or something, and gives good measures, and then he drank it. So... who's driving when they go back?
Yeah, That's something I didn't notice, yeah. And I have said before that they don't drink and drive, but clearly they must have. And not only did they drink and drive, but they drove a long way.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, Rodney hadn't drank his drink, admittedly, in this scene, but he had one. So I assume he would have drank it before he left.
Yeah. I mean, some people think that it's okay to have a drink and drive. I just don't know. I mean, in this case, Dell's going to drink more, which we haven't got to yet, but yeah.
So, but that's all I had for that part. And before I go on to the phone call bit, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, most of my notes we've covered already. This scene particularly is very similar to Dell's behaviour in A Royal Flush. I wrote here that Lord Ridgem is played by Geoffrey Toone, who was a distinguished character actor, both on screen and stage, perhaps best known for his role as Sir Edward Ramsay in the 1956 film The King and I. Okay. I wrote here that Grandad and Rodney definitely would have seen Lord Ridgem mouth to his wife because he's standing in front of the couch where they were facing, so he would have seen him go, "Get rid of them."
I don't even think you would need to have seen that to know that they wanted rid of them. I mean, everything about their mannerisms, everything, they clearly wanted them out.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's an uncomfortable scene because obviously we, as the audience, are seeing it from the point of view of the Lord and Lady Ridgem. It's awkward, and you can feel that Rodney and Grandad feel the awkwardness, or at least Rodney does. You don't know what Grandad's thinking, but yeah, it's kind of, is it the first time really that we're seeing how oblivious Dell is to the people around him, wanting him gone? I'm trying to think if there's any other time.
I don't know if he is oblivious to it. I think he knows, and he just goes all in to get what he wants. I don't think he cares. Like, because Dell is not stupid. He's not a naive character. He's actually quite switched on in a number of situations. So I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't be fully aware of what he's doing in this moment. And he's like, I'm going to stay until I get the business deal because that's what I came here for. And I think that's what it's all about.
And we know everyone dislikes Royal Flush, or at least most fans dislike Royal Flush, and John Sullivan is known to have disliked the way that Dell's character came across in Royal Flush. But no one ever says anything about this, so I think that's only because of the way that it kind of it's at Rodney's expense in Royal Flush. No one really minds this behaviour here. No,
I agree. Yeah, it's because it's particularly cruel to Rodney. I agree. In Royal Flush, that's how it comes across. Yeah.
And then one last note I had is what you said, which is, Rodney's trying to be like Dell in the way that he's like, oh, no, it's a lease in a tower block, like he's trying to do what Dell does, which is embellish and make things sound better.
Yeah.
He's only somewhat good at it. So Dell is good at it, Rodney's okay at it, and Grandad can't do it at all.
Yes.
He has no idea. The council said we could buy it for $8,000.
I know, bless him. Yeah, it's so sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, but he does do it a little bit in Long Legs of the Law when he covers and he's like, we toured.
No, that's true. That's true. Well, yeah, I was going to say in the scene where they're looking at the chandeliers, Grandad goes along with what Dell says and doesn't believe what he's saying. So he obviously can do it, but... So
he's not as good, yeah.
He's not as good, yeah. So for the next scene, I wrote, Dell overhears this extremely expositional conversation between the Lord and the chandelier people. I cannot, because the line that really annoys me now, looking at it from a scriptwriter's point of view, something you would never say.
Yes, I am aware that it is 17th century French crystal. I own the damn things.
It's just, nobody would say that line. It would just be like, yes, I'm aware of that. That's what you'd say. You wouldn't say it like that.
License.
Of course, because Dell has to overhear all these facts, or the rest of the episode can't happen. So, but yes, I find now that I watch that back, I'm like, that is the most ridiculous conversation. Obviously, Dell's there and again, for the next scene, I'm going to bring it up again. I'll bring it up at the end of the scenes, but just hold that thought for a moment about that conversation. So we go... they're finally getting rid of Dell and Rodney and Grandad, or so they think. So they take them into the main hall where the chandeliers are hanging. And we have this great line where Dell says,
bet you've held a few balls in here, my lady.
What?
And she misunderstands, which is just wonderful, because you'd never imagine her mind would go there, but her reaction is so on point before she realizes what he's talking about. So that's quite funny. And then they continue trying to get rid of the trotters, and then Dell repeats back everything he heard during the phone call, which I wrote would have made me immediately suspicious if I was the Lord, because I have just literally said all this on the phone right when Dell was there. He supposedly went in the door, but he's repeating back only facts that he heard on the phone, nothing else.
French crystal? 17th century, that, isn't it, Grandad? But is it Louis XIII or Louis XIV? Now, don't tell me, Your Lordship, I can get this... That is Louis XIV.
So if I was that Lord, I'd be like, I just said all that on the phone. Maybe he was listening. Because what's more likely in that situation, that Dell is in fact this and the Trotter family are in fact these wonderful chandelier makers, cleaners, or the fact that they're tradesmen selling crappy cats out of the back of a van and they are conmen? Like, which one's more obvious? And he goes with, no, they must be really like chandelier makers. So yes, I just find that a bit ridiculous, a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is plausible that people of Dell's like class from the city would be chandelier cleaners by trade. It's totally plausible, because John Sullivan's dad would do jobs like that. But yeah, I think it's a little bit too much of a coincidence, when you hear that back.
Yeah, and also the fact that he's selling them a porcelain cat that plays How Much Is That Doggy in the Window. Why would he be doing that if he was a chandelier cleaner trader guy?
Maybe though, did he know about the cats, or was that just Lady Ridgem? Because
he goes up to him outside the phone call and says,
Just a minute, Trotter. How much is that doggy in the window?
Don't know. Depends how much you want to spend.
I forgot about that line. How much is that doggy in the window? It doesn't look... Yeah, I wrote a note here about the first look at the chandeliers. It doesn't look like Lady Ridgem believes them at all. She is completely like, really? Like, she is not... She doesn't look like she believes them. So, yeah, it's obviously just the Lord that believes them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I just wrote, Dell is a top-class bullshitter in this scene. Like, in that sense, I can understand. I mean, he does talk the talk. He sounds like he's knowledgeable. And Rodney... sort of trying to go along with it when he says,
Our name goes right back in history, doesn't it, Rodney?
Yeah. Right the way back to the plague.
I love Grandad's line with...
Yeah, if you like, Dell.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So, like, why didn't Grandad go, no, we've never been near a chandelier? Like, why did he blow Rodney's stuff but not Dell's thing? This is what I mean. And... I agree about what the lady says and that she doesn't believe them, because I said what she said is so sarcastic.
Did you know there are still 4 trotters hanging in Buckingham Palace?
Amazing.
And then so the Lord asked Dell to stay on so they can discuss the deal. So great for them. And we get this lovely little moment where David Jason's about to go into the room and he winks sort of almost to the camera, which is lovely. So that's a nice way to end the scene. Any more notes on that scene?
No, not really. I only wrote that this is a classic Dell scheming where he creates a narrative and he just assumes Rodney and Dell will back it up. Sorry, Rodney and Grandad.
Yeah, because, and they do. I think they're probably used to this by this point, right? Where they're like, oh, Dell's onto one, let's back him up. Yeah.
It reminds me of the scene in Mother Nature's Son where he's like starting to build the whole Peckham Spring thing and Rodney's just giving him dirty looks and he just carries on with it and like, yeah.
Yeah, there's multiple times when Rodney does that look in later episodes at Dell when he's trying to do something bad or wrong. But he still goes along with
that tone of voice, Rodney. That little wink is definitely a used shot in lots of documentaries. I know that little,
Yeah, it's a lovely little moment. I agree.
Yeah, that's all I have for that scene.
Okay, so then we get our one scene in the flat. So we're back at Nelson and Mandela, and straight away we find out that Rodney doesn't want to do it, and Dell has made the deal that they'll be paid 350 quid, and I think he was being quoted like £1,200 or something on the phone, which is a considerable discount. So even if he did assume that Dell was a conman or something, I'm not surprised he snapped that up straight away, because that is a massive discount compared to what he was quoted. And then Rodney is skeptical that Dell will not do the job properly. And Dell says that he knows a panel beater who owes him a favour. Any ideas what a panel beater is?
I mean, somebody that beats panels into shape. Panels, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah. I'm sure that's exactly what it is. If anyone in the comments again wants to tell us what a panel beater is, that would be greatly appreciated. So Dell seems to think that once they do the job, suddenly they will become part of the royal elite, which is just ridiculous. And then, so this is something I personally don't like. I'm sure you don't either. So Dell really tries to sort of glamorize being part of the elite by talking about how he's going to go fox hunting.
As our steeds bite on the reins, eager for the chase. Whoa, boy, whoa. Oh, hello, Tally-ho, Sir Herbert. Did you ken John Peel?
Which is definitely something I'm not down with. And then Rodney reacts by making fun of Dell when he starts sort of pretending to be on a horse and stuff. And I actually thought Dell's reaction here was quite interesting to that, because this is the first time we really do see, I said, Dell's inner snob really trying to break out. But he actually gives a bit of justification to that here, where he says,
I deserve a bit of a good life. I've worked hard enough for it. I mean, I've always been a trier.
You kind of understand a little bit more after he says that, kind of where he's coming from. And this is sort of how he sees the good life as being royal or being part of the royals. To me, that would be like one of the worst things if that could happen to me. Like that, I wouldn't consider that the good life at all, being part of like the royal family. But obviously for Dell, and I guess a lot of Brits, you know, who look up to the royals, they probably would see it the same way Dell does. So there is something that we see. Sorry, this is something that we do see more prominently in later series. But yeah, this is the first time we're seeing it, so it's interesting. And this is also the first time, and I'm sure there are multiple times, I think in season 6 in Yuppie Love, he refers to the where they live as a tower, as a Lego set built by the council. The tower block is a Lego set built by the council. I know he refers to it in Yuppie Love because they're talking about selling the flat. And Dell says something like, this council-built Lego set. So yeah, multiple times he says that. If there's any other times, I can't remember. And then Dell seems like he's taking it very seriously at this moment. Again, trapping Rodney, giving him that security, like...
Your shoes will be made by Gucci. Your jewellery will come from Asprey's. Your clothes will be made by... man at C&A.
And Rodney has once again been convinced by Dell's patter. And then when Rodney leaves the room, Dell and Grandad, of course, the real conversation comes out. And Grandad says,
"No bodging. I think he lacks faith in you, Dell boy."
It's always been his trouble, isn't it, eh? Oi! Here, do me a favour, will you, Grandad? Pop out in the kitchen, see if we got any Windowlene and super glue left, will you?
So yeah, Dell absolutely intends to do the opposite of what Rodney asked him to do, which is a proper job. So any comments on the scene that I didn't say?
No, not really. Only that you, which we mentioned in the Yellow Peril episode, is that they filmed this at the same time. So the one shot in Nelson Mandela in the Yellow Peril and the one shot in this were filmed in one studio shooting. Because there's only one one scene in the flat. So people have said if you put the two scenes side by side, you can see that nothing moved.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. But, I've never watched them like back to back or side by side, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
okay,
that's all
so great. Okay, so we go back to Ridgem Hall, the day of the cleaning, where we get our most famous shot, one of the most famous shots of Animals and Horses. So Rodney's setting up the ladder underneath the chandelier, and Dell sends Grandad upstairs and asks him,
"Wait, Grandad, do you want a jemmy?"
No, had one before we left.
I just want to check, he's referring to a jammy dodger there or a pea? I really don't know.
I thought, I don't know why, but I always thought he meant a cup of tea.
Oh, okay, you thought tea, because I thought you meant either a jammy dodger or a piss. Like, that's what I thought he was talking about, and you thought it was a cup of tea. So again, I don't know what he's referring to there, because it could be any of them who say, had one before I left.
What does he mean? Should have done a poll. I don't know what he really means by that. Yeah, people love that line, and I wonder, what does he mean by that? Yeah,
it's a great line because of the misunderstanding. But what Grandad is misunderstanding it to be, we don't know. And then Dell explains to Wallace, the butler, how the chandelier is held onto the ceiling. And I wrote, I wonder how Dell knows all that. Because that really does sound like Dell is an expert in chandeliers from the way he describes all that. Like, how did they know that's how a chandelier is held onto the ceiling? How do they know how they get it down? They must have done some research, right?
There is a long threaded bolt through that chandelier. It goes through a wooden joist. And it's held in position by a locking nut.
I don't know. That may be, but how? Like, it's not like you could just Google stuff in those days. I guess whenever I see this, I always just assume that Dell did trade stuff like this before when he was younger.
I mean, it's very specific and, again, very confident. Of course, Dell is confident when he cons people, but, when he talks about the whole process, I would really believe he was a chandelier expert in that moment.
Me too. So... And I think maybe they did that so that we, the audience, understand that they know how to get it off the ceiling.
Yeah.
Because I think, to be honest, we'll get more into this, but I think it's building up to the idea that they're going to drop it, right? Like, they build up to that. That's why they, cleverly use misdirection. You don't think that the other one's going to fall. So all of this is foreshadowing for the idea that the audience is supposed to think they're going to drop it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so Rodney continues to complain. Rodney's always complaining. And he still thinks they're not going to get paid because we find out that the Lord and Lady are on holiday and it's just Wallace there. And then Grandad begins taking up the floorboards and again, I wrote, how does Grandad know exactly which room to go into and which floorboards to take up, like which spot? Because that would be very difficult to do without knowing exactly like where the chandelier is on the ceiling. You could be looking for that bolt for hours and he finds it right away. So obviously this is just to speed the episode up. It wouldn't have been very interesting if we had, an hour of Grandad looking for the bolt. And then Grandad says,
I'm starting to undo it.
No!
Then we cut to, I think, what is the beginning of the most famous exchange, the most well-known bit of this episode, where we've got Dell and Rodney going up the ladders with their spud sack, I wrote. It's like the most unprofessional material they could find. And they have the exchange where they go up the ladder.
Right, Rodney, is there anything you want?
Yeah, I want to go home.
The intensity's building. We've got Grandad turning the bolt. We've got Grandad saying,
One more turn, Dell.
Right. Now brace yourself, Rodney. Brace yourself.
and then, of course, the wrong chandelier falls down. Everybody probably around the country burst into laughter when that happened. And again, that is a perfect moment. I can't, say anything bad about that because it is absolute comic gold. The way that the shot is done, even like the cuts between the different angles and stuff of it falling down. I think we get three different angles of the actual chandelier falling and hitting the floor. It's just fantastic. Yeah. There is a couple of continuity issues I would like to point out there. So the biggest problem that I have with this when I think about it is Grandad's voice when they're having the conversation about the turning and the sound of the thing turning would have been on the other side of the room. It sounds like they're listening to it happening right above their heads, but it isn't because it's on the other side of the room. So actually, they would have known if you're yelling to someone upstairs and they're on the other side of the the big building at the hall, you'd hear that they were far away and not directly above you.
This did happen, though.
That's what I mean. So, I wonder if because there was more of them, they had like a chain of communication rather than just like shouting. Because surely in that situation, you think about it logically, if someone is in the floor directly above you, you'd hear the sound coming through the floor there, as opposed to like really far away. Like Grandad's voice, even if he was shouting, would have been clearly distant. Do you know what I mean? And then again, like the sound of the grrr, like we hear it in the footage, like the sound of the turning.
It's still believable, but just because it's a big old creaky house, and I know that sound carries differently. So, and they didn't think about that. So, like they maybe just assume because he's up in another room that his voice is distant. So. It's still believable. I know what you mean. It could be a factor, but the fact that it happened in real life and it's based on a true story is enough to make it plausible.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. Yeah, I'm nitpicking, but yeah, I just that's something that doesn't sit quite right with me from a continuity point of view. Now we do get some dialogue actually straight after the chandelier goes down, which I think is completely unnecessary because it's not that funny. It's just two lines between Dell and Rodney when he says,
"I was undoing the other chandelier."
How can you tell?
Like I don't.
I like those lines.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't think we needed that because I think the moment the chandelier that was enough. And actually, in the laugh track, those two lines don't really get a laugh. Well, everyone's already laughed out.
Yeah, I was going to say they're hidden a little bit, but it helps just sort of like show that they're in shock because they just talk very quietly and slowly, don't they? And then they go down the ladder.
Well, that's what I mean. I think because it is a joke, actually, that Rodney sells when he says, "How can you tell?"
Yeah.
Like, that's a joke. So it's a bit weird that they say it in the shocked way because in that moment you would be taking it very seriously and that's a joke.
Yeah.
So maybe just the actual lines don't sit quite right with me. I'm not sure.
Before you go down the ladder, then I'll do my notes if you want.
Sure.
And then, because then we'll carry on with this last little bit of dialogue afterwards.
Sounds good.
So, yeah, I wrote here... they both sound very nervous when they're climbing the ladder, and I think that it's probably real nerves because, as we know that they were told, or at least Nick Lyndhurst was told that he would be fired if he laughed. I think a lot of people know that. We don't think Ray Butt means it, but they were trying to be so strict with them because they've been told this prop was so expensive. They had one take, and they had a lot of pressure on them to not mess this shot up. Yeah. So when they're going up the ladder and Dell's like, "Want anything, Rodney?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want to go home." Like, they sound really nervous. I think that's probably real nerves. And the shot was positioned really carefully to make sure that nobody really focuses on the fact that there is a chandelier in the back. It's deliberately done like this so that you don't even give that a thought, and you're so focused on the thought that they're balancing on the ladders and they're holding the tarpaulin, you think they're gonna break it. It's very clever that they that they did it that way. So Ray Butt's direction was excellent in this scene.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
So it's true that originally what was going to happen was they were going to run the credits over the shot of them holding the tarpauling and just looking at each other for 30 full seconds while the other chandelier just lay on the ground. And they decided not to do that because they didn't think that they would be able to keep straight faces for that long. So they changed the ending.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. With regards to Ray Butt himself, he had to shove a handkerchief in his mouth not to laugh.
Yes, I've seen the interview with Nick Lyndhurst when he describes what Ray Butt was doing during that shot. It's in, I can't remember which documentary, when he says, and I looked over and Ray Butt was shaking like this.
Yeah.
You know.
They all said that all the crew were laughing and shaking. So they were told that they couldn't laugh, but everyone else was. And John Sullivan was the only one here that did the right thing. He said he had to leave the set. He wasn't there because he knew he's a big laugher. So he would have ruined it. So he did the right thing and he left. But if you actually look at the moment the chandelier falls, you can see that they're both looking up at the ceiling. They weren't looking at the crew. So they would have been able to sense it probably, but they were professional and they didn't look at the crew. They were actually looking up. And the shot cuts immediately to the fallen chandelier. So there's only literally a split second of their faces.
Yes.
So they could have probably got away with clever editing if they'd laughed. They wouldn't have had to scrap it.
No,
Like,
but of course they wanted
yeah.
to make sure they got full coverage from all angles, I'm sure, for that, as you say,
course.
very expensive take. So any one of them laughing, it means they wouldn't have been able to use one of the angles of the shots. So
Right. But the final edit includes literally a split second of them both looking up. You can see the chandelier fall in the background, and then it cuts to the chandelier, and then it cuts back to their reaction, and the chandelier's already on the ground. So they could have laughed, and it would have been fine. But yeah, they didn't know that, of course.
They didn't
know
that,
how the shot was going to come out. So... and then,
plus their characters would not have laughed in that moment. They would have been like horrified as they played it.
Of course not. Yeah, in real life. Yeah, I mean in real life of the Trotters.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the last note I had was that Grandad's smile when he's coming down the stairs is absolutely hilarious.
Oh yeah, I haven't got to that bit. Yes, but yes, I put his looking very pleased with himself is hilarious, and he says,
"All right, dear boy."
Yeah, is that all you have? Because I've just got a couple more things I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say. I was going to wrap up my notes with that, and then you can just finish off the episode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure, no worries. So, I said coming down the ladder in silence would have been perfect for me, but they have those few lines. But as you said, you like them. I'm sure other people do as well. And I thought it was very funny the way that Dell and Rodney were planning to take the weight of a huge chandelier with that old blanket, just holding it in their hands, thinking they'd be strong enough. I mean, they had no idea, like, if this was the real situation. I'm curious if the real people that this happened to were trying to do that as well in that way. Because even the position of the ladders, there's a better way to do it. They're like leaning like on the ladder with like one hand under the ladder. It would be better if they just turned the ladder around so they like had it equally and they could stand. You know what I mean? It's very awkward, the whole thing there. But again, for comedic purposes, I suppose it works. And then we get this really funny line where Grandad says,
How could we drop it? We wasn't even holding it. We was working on that one.
Well, I wish you'd have said something. I was working on this one.
And then we get Wallace coming back in, and I absolutely love his reaction when he goes,
It's broken.
And then, of course, Dell, very sarcastic with him afterwards. I said here, I think the ending of this episode is actually pretty good. It's interesting you just mentioned how they were planning to end it. So I love the line where Dell says,
Oh, by the way, has his lordship got our home address and telephone number?
And as he's saying that line, he's like reaching into his pocket as though he's about to write it down. And then obviously Wallace goes,
No.
Good. Right, out of it.
And then we get this really funny shot, which just reminded me a little bit of The Russians Are Coming. Probably because it's the hectic van thing and sort of Grandad being shoved in the back and Rodney, in this case, it's Rodney hanging out the back in the van, like going without him. And he lunges into the back of the van, which is hilarious. That was really Nick Lyndhurst doing that. So that looks a bit dangerous to me. I mean, I don't know who was driving, if it was really David Jason, but if Nick Lyndhurst did that stunt himself, he literally had to chase the van and dive into the back of the van while it was moving, which would be quite dangerous, I would have thought.
I wrote that in my notes up, but it looks very dangerous. Couldn't find anything about the stunt, like no notes or interviews or anything, but it looks like they all did actually genuinely do it and the van was moving. But I mean, he was 21 maybe, and they did a lot of their own stunts and stuff. They did a lot of slapstick stuff because they did that running stunt with Leonard Pierce in The Russians Are Coming.
True.
I don't know. Maybe he just didn't feel like it was dangerous. It was very funny. And yeah, like we've talked a lot about endings, haven't we? About
Yes.
quality of endings, and yes, we know that they were going to just end on the chandelier drop. That would have been very inconclusive.
Yeah.
Like, what happened? Like, how the hell did they get out of that? Not that it would have mattered in future episodes, but it's at least interesting to know how they got out of it, which is funny. Lord and Lady Ridgem weren't around. Wallace is kind of like, oh, no.
Yeah, I said that little exchange, which like when Wallace comes over and that exchange like with Grandad and Rodney and Dell, like after it breaks. Yeah, I think those lines are great and they're very funny. So I'm glad that they kept that in. And I wonder if Leonard Pierce was actually in the back of the van when, because if Nicholas Lyndhurst had to dive in, I guess it would have been quite dangerous if Leonard Pierce had actually been sitting in the back. But I also love all their equipment just like falling out and like all over the driveway. And the fact that Dell like immediately gets in the front and just drives, he doesn't care about Rodney and Grandad. I think that's quite funny as well.
Yeah, it's funny because we know that the true story, the consequence was they got sacked.
Yes.
But like, that's not a consequence.
No, I mean,
like,
you just broke a really expensive chandelier, so yeah, it wouldn't be a consequence. They dismissed themselves, so it's the same thing, right? Same thing,
they weren't
innit?
hired. Yeah, they weren't doing a job like John Sullivan's
Yeah.
dad. Like they were kind of just contractors, but yeah, they hadn't. But then, yeah, like how dumb. Well, I guess we'll come on to this in a minute with Plonker, but they didn't take any of their contact information. I guess maybe it was a thing of the time.
Agree.
But...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty insane to think. Well, it's what is it? Pay peanuts, get monkeys. You know, they had such a discounted price for what it was quoted to them originally. They should have known. And of course, after meeting the Trotters for that like couple of hours they were at their house, they should have known. I mean, it's their own fault, really. So yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's all my notes.
Okay, so if that's everything for the episode breakdown, let's move on to our awards segment.
And guess what? He's only one.
Okay, so as always, we have 3 awards to announce this week. So we'll start with Plonker of the Week.
Don't believe it. What a plonker. What a plonker.
So for Plonker of the Week, we each nominate a Plonker and then we discuss who wins. So who is your nomination this week, dude, for Plonker of the Week?
Well, the most obvious Plonker is Dell, because Dell's... you don't think so? Sorry, I saw your face then when I said that. No? I think Dell is the most obvious Plonker because he thought he could do this job well without any proper training, which I think is just the most ridiculous thing you could think, because clearly that is a really difficult thing to do. So it's also pretty stupid to buy a cat that plays How Much Is That Doggy in the Window and think it would sell well. So those two things. But as you just said about the Lord of the Manor, him hiring Dell is really dumb as well. So I mean, kind of a toss-up between Dell and the Lord of the Manor.
Oh, well, then it should be easy. My nomination is Lord Ridgem.
Okay.
Because, like, we never know. We never get to find out if the chandelier hadn't dropped. We never get to find out. They probably might have been able to get away with this. Dell knew how to put the chandelier up and take it down. He had his Windowlene and glue. It's quite possible that they might have gotten away with this, especially with how much of a plonker Lord Ridgem is. Like, Lord Ridgem is so stupid. Like, first of all, like, you've got all that big manor. You've got your big friggin' Louis XV chandeliers or whatever. Pay a proper person to take care of it. Don't hire somebody that you don't know, who, like you said, is very obviously kind of a con man.
Well, they always say the people who are the richest are the rich because they don't spend money, because they're stingy. They don't want to spend money.
Yeah, so. I know. He fell for all of that stuff with Dell saying all the things that he just said on the phone, and he didn't get any contact information of him, and he wasn't even around on the day the job was being done. So.
And actually, and he invited them into the house, not knowing who they were, because they just said, "We're friends of your lady wife." Yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah, definitely him, not Dell.
Yeah. So, Plonker of the Week is Lord Ridgem.
I just remembered. I've got a bottle of rather special port through there in the study.
Yeah. Okay, so then this week, Heather will award Best Line of the Episode, and I will award Best Moment of the Episode. So, dude, what have you chosen for your Best Line of the Episode?
Can I just say, you have got the easiest job in the world this week. That is so unfair.
I was so happy when I saw
it.
that I got the best moment for this one, yeah.
Man, I feel like I got screwed last week as well with It Never Rains.
Who gets best moment for Yuppie Love?
Oh, man, yeah, we need to check. Okay, so I the best line, in my opinion, is the exchange after the chandelier is dropped when Grandad says... but I also think a contender for this line is, because I just love this line because of her reaction, is the...
Bet you build a few balls in here, my lady.
What?
Yeah. Her reaction is really just on point there. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to decide which one you think is better, dude, out of those two?
Yeah, I mean, I really like that line with the balls. But yeah, like I feel like you've got to, sometimes you want the line to apply to the moment, right?
To the moment,
like apply to the chandelier at the very least. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I do like that. Yeah, I wish you'd said something. I was working on the other one, but like exchange. But yeah, it's hard to say. It doesn't have like a standout memorable line, and that makes sense because it has a standout memorable moment. Which barely goes without like saying here. We don't need to really go over the motions.
What's the best moment? Well, I like it when Dell buys the porcelain cats. That's the best moment of the whole episode.
I mean, it has also the good moment with the chasing the van at the end, of course.
That's true.
You can't award it anything else. It's the moment the chandelier drops. It goes down in history in all the top 10s of Only Fools and Horses comedy moments, and quite often in British TV comedy moments overall. So
it's always in the montages, at least, when they're talking about best moments in comedy. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
completely agree.
I don't think we really need to drag that out anymore. So drink up, we're leaving.
Okay, so that about wraps it up for this week. So join us next week when we'll be discussing the last episode of Series 2, which was the 1982 Christmas special, Diamonds Are For Me, or Heather.
No.
Sorry. I always, obviously, finding an Only Fools and Horses episode that had my name in it made me feel good when I was younger. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. So until then... Au revoir, listeners. If you like what you hear and want to contact us, you can email us at longlivehooky street podcast@gmail.com. All one word, no spaces. Bonjour.